For more on the situation in Flint, Michigan and the worldwide challenge of providing clean water, we're joined by Brent Fewell. He's the founder of the Earth and Water Group, an environmental services group of companies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here, Elaine.
You know, we just saw the story in Flint, Michigan, and we've been hearing for years about crumbling infrastructure in the United States, not just roads and bridges and overpasses, but also water infrastructure. So is Flint a fluke, or can we see this happen in other places?
Yeah, I think, Elaine, the problem that we see is out of sight, out of mind. And so with water infrastructure, sometimes it's the last thing that people think about and want to fund. I think our hearts go out to those folks and families in Flint. I think it is symptomatic of a bigger problem in the U.S., and in many cases that has to deal with the lack of funding and technical resources to maintain these systems.
How big of a problem is this?
Well, EPA estimates that the funding gap over the next 20 years could be as much as $1 trillion that we're not spending, that we need to be spending in order to fix these problems.
So we could see this happen in other cities?
Well, we're actually seeing similar problems in other cities. So while Flint, it's a very serious problem, in other cities you're starting to see the same impacts of failing infrastructure.
And likely not just here, but in other countries around the world.
Absolutely.
As well. You know, we have been hearing that water is one of the most valuable natural resources. Talk to us about climate change and how is this issue, which we've seen at the forefront on the international stage, how will it impact water?
Well, there's no doubt that climate change is going to impact many regions differently. We're going to see areas where there's going to be more wet weather, is going to be more wet. There's going to be more water, so they have to deal with flooding and pollution problems. And in other areas, they're not going to have enough water. And we're seeing droughts in California and across the world in areas that we have not seen it before.
There's a push for so-called natural water infrastructure that includes tree canopies, deep roots, other methods to naturally purify water. How effective can that be?
Well, increasingly here in the U.S., I think cities are realizing that Mother Nature can a lot of times take care of itself. So we're seeing communities use what we call green infrastructure, and it's exactly that, using ecosystems to actually mitigate the impacts of water, including separating sanitary stormwater from rainwater and ultimately improving water quality and protecting sources of our drinking water.
Will that make a huge difference in the other problem you just mentioned with infrastructure?
Well, it certainly could. It's not going to be a panacea. I think what the green infrastructure is doing is help reducing the cost to communities to provide clean, safe water. And there's greater flexibility. Many of these communities understand their own problems and in many cases need to find more flexible ways to find safe, clean drinking water and surface water.
Wasteful consumer behavior.
Yes.
How does that affect our water supply? What can you tell us about that? What can we do?
Yeah, well, certainly we are blessed in this country in many areas with an abundance of water. But at those areas where water is becoming more scarce, there is a real need to address the demand issue and encourage more communities to conserve. And frankly, there's many technologies that are coming on the market now that can actually help those communities find ways to conserve water.
All right, Brent Fewell, thank you so much. We appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Certainly. Thank you, Elaine.